So, genug der Vorrede. Wir wollen direkt in das Thema einsteigen, denn heute haben wir auch wieder natürlich das Thema 5G Campusnetze und 5G Ökosysteme. Und da freue ich mich sehr, dass wir Professor Dr. Thomas Magedanz bei uns haben als Strategic Advisor der UNIBERG GmbH und Andreas Möller, der CEO der UNIBERG GmbH. Kommen Sie doch bitte beide zu mir auf die Bühne und wir freuen uns sehr über den ersten Vortrag heute von Ihnen. Vorsicht, nicht stolpern.
Alles gut.
Am zweiten Tag der Messe. Schön, dass Sie da sind, Herr Magedanz. Herr Möller, die Bühne gehört Ihnen.
Alles klar. Gut. Sehr verehrte Damen und Herren, ich freue mich sehr, heute hier als Repräsentant der UNIBERG GmbH für Sie Erkenntnisse darzureichen, welche Rolle der zukünftige Integrator spielt. Allerdings, I think this talk is in English and I was just confused about the German introduction, so I go back to the original planning. So, the talk title is Challenges and Opportunities of 5G Network Customization and Optimization in Open 5G Plus Ecosystems. So wow, that's a long title, and obviously I have to explain a little bit what I want to talk about. It's basically that we need customized networks, and in the future we need the integrator as a key role to make these campus networks a big success. So basically, Andreas Möller is the CEO of the company. I am strategic advisor, as you have learned. And in principle, what we have learned in the past, that there's a lot of hype about 5G, but in principle, the 5G networks are currently, as we see them, are made for the public or for the general public. Customization is really low in these public network infrastructures. So what we, however, see globally, there's a market, a growing demand for campus networks, which of course have to be customized to the very specific needs of very different application areas. And so in this context, we believe that there is a new ecosystem arising. I call this the 5G plus ecosystem, not necessarily the 5G advanced or 6G ecosystem. In principle, we see a lot of innovation currently coming in due to these specific requirements coming from the different verticals. So why do we see the global interest in campus networks? Basically because they allow for customization. They allow for optimization if the infrastructure is designed in the right way. In principle, drivers are typically privacy concerns, security requirements to keep data local, and to have full control of the network infrastructure to be integrated into the end-to-end enterprise architecture. We also see that, of course, companies like to have a free choice of vendor selection. And exactly this allows in the future, particularly for this customization of these infrastructures. We see that there are different spectrum requirements and we need local adaptation to very specific needs. So this means a campus network in Germany probably looks a little bit different than a campus network in Japan or in Asia or in the US. So we also have this to take into account. And of course, finally, we see that networks are evolving. They are growing over the future to meet future demands. So this is about to save your investments and ideally have a living architecture. So what we see today, there's no real one-size-fits-all network. We see that currently a lot of research projects, but also a lot of players are working on blueprints, how to create these future networks in order to allow for this customization. Besides these opportunities that you may get your own infrastructure which really does the job, there are of course currently a lot of challenges which we are seeing in the field. And the reasons are manifold. We see that the different industries of course need dedicated know-how in order to understand the requirements of, for instance, the e-health sector, the manufacturing sector, the safety sector, and the like. So this knowledge is key to have in order to build a customized solution. We also know when building up a 5G infrastructure, which has to be integrated into this end-to-end enterprise architecture, You, of course, also have to understand the 5G technologies, and this is rocket science these days, because we talk about virtualized infrastructures which have to adapt to the needs in order to be optimized and adapted to specific angles, being it performance, being it energy savings, and the like. What is key, and particularly this is what I want to address, when we nowadays talk about 5G networks, we talk about organic networks. We talk about software-based networks. So this means once we deploy these networks, which could be adapt to usage demands. Let's say we can start with a very small network and the network could grow according to the lifetime and the needs. This means we have a network which is constantly changing, and particularly in these days where we want to upgrade functionalities in an end-to-end fashion, we have to have a new mentality. I call it the DevOps DNA. We always have a system where we are developing, we are integrating, we are running it, and of course, based on our findings, we are optimizing the system with new components or just for fault management, maintenance reasons. So this continuous integration, continuous development, continuous integration, continuous testing is a sophisticated process, and particularly in this context, these new networks need very specific skills. And last but not least, a key challenge, and we see it already here today. We have currently quite a number of core network suppliers, base station suppliers. Open RAN is adding complexity to this by providing different components. So the question is, how does a modular open campus network look in the future? Which components work with each other? And exactly this is the key challenge of the ecosystem today. It's a growing ecosystem. We cannot be sure which combinations currently are working. So this means someone who is building up these networks is basically having to have a very good knowledge about this ecosystem. So in principle, as mentioned before, we talk about these organic infrastructures which could grow and shrink according to demands in order to allow this return of investment and future-proofness, let's call it that way. And particularly, we have to understand the life cycle of networks. We need to plan them, we need to deploy them, we need to run them, operate them. And again, we talk about optimization during the lifetime for specific reasons. And this basically is a complex task. So we believe, and in some studies we have performed in a big research project, Campus OS is also having a booth here, that the ecosystem is probably driven by integrators, because only integrators have the knowledge which is needed to provide these customized network infrastructures. So there are different aspects to be considered for these integrators. So first of all, they are the ones which typically mediate between the application provider or the enterprise and the underlying infrastructure suppliers, so the vendors, the product owners, or the product suppliers. Secondly, they particularly can support this whole life cycle of a network support based on their experiences. We see also that based on running a network, optimizing a network, there's a high potential to source new products in order to optimize these networks and the applications in this context. Last but not least, particularly these third parties are ideally proven partners for a long lifetime relationship. So therefore, locality matters. So when we are here talking about campus networks to be built up in Germany, for instance, typically it is a wise decision to take a local integrator who knows the environment and which is very close to your place. Of course, network operators and enterprises themselves could try to do the job, but due to the diversity, I guess it will be many integrators who will play a key role in the future, and this is why, for instance, UNIBERG is one of those integrators, and I hand over to Andreas.
Yeah, what makes a good integrator? I think a good integrator should not only have the knowledge in mobile network technology, a good integrator must have the understanding what are the KPIs of the industry and how to integrate the application layer into with the mobile network to provide end-to-end functionality and ease of operation, maintenance, and providing the functionality which is necessary, the quality which is necessary to operate the business. So the key is to ease the functionality of the radio network with the application, the industry applications. The second point is for sure, he needs to look on security. He needs to look into that the business systems already existing business systems are working together with the mobile network in a way that there's a zero-touch functionality, there's less operational technology necessary to operate the system. Because mobile networks can be quite complex and the enterprise may not have the knowledge to operate such complex mobile network infrastructures. Specifically, if the mobile network infrastructure must adapt dynamically, like in construction automation, where you would like to adapt the mobile network according to the progress of constructions. Another point is, let's say, that the system integrator must have the test lab where he elaborates what needs to be deployed. This is quite important so that the technology being integrated at the customer side is already pre-evaluated and certified to be used for the customer. And the third point is he needs to have strong partnerships in the application domain, so in the industry domain, as well as into the mobile network technologies. Those things we believe are the major keys for integration service provider aspects. So what are the benefits and what are the come-outs on good integrations? I already mentioned, let's say, the ease of operations, the reduced overhead in system technology, the optimized technology for the business, but at the same time, the availability of the full system must be given at any time. The fast root cause analytics, and I mean the application user is not interested in why or what happens at the mobile network infrastructure. He is interested in the application layer. So why does my machine, why does my robot does not work? Is it the edge technology? Is it the mobile network? Is it the steering system of the robot? These questions must be integrated into an operation system which includes the industry domain and the IT domain. So why you may not need to have an integrator? If you buy a box which already fully integrates and the application services as well as the mobile network services, if you have a fully integrated system, you may not need to have an integrator. And the best integrator, I don't agree so much, should be self-replaceable or shall be replaceable. So this means you may only need him for a short time. And for sure, modern networks are self-organizing. Modern networks are zero-touch service management-oriented technologies. We believe that we will see adapted solutions for specific markets which will really provide the functionality on the application layer as well as in the mobile network layer. So the 5G core system will be adapted to the specific needs to the application, and the O-RAN, the functionality of O-RAN will allow specific adaptations so that the application layer does not may need a large integrator. That's my points on integration.
Okay, I think we still have a couple of minutes, and our moderator is unfortunately still in busy talks. So there is a chance for questions and potential answers. So, dear moderator, would you be happy to take over, or should we just continue? Because basically, in the meantime, what we, of course, want to stress, there's a UNIBERG booth where you can see parts of the demonstration lab or the innovation lab from UNIBERG. And there's a second booth where you can see a little bit the ecosystem exploration, which I mentioned in my talk, where we discuss about who are the suppliers, who are the verticals, who are interested in campus networks, who are potential integrators. So basically you will hear even today a little bit more in the later afternoon about the ecosystem and requirements from verticals into exactly this kind of context. But dear moderator, if there are any questions, we are happy to take these questions.
Are there any questions from the audience online? No, not yet. They are just drinking coffee outside there. So let me have a look around. Are there any questions from the audience here in the hall? That's not the case.
Now, we try to be fast. Honestly, we try to be fast in order to allow for this interactivity. Otherwise, of course, we can elaborate even a little bit more. Because what Andreas has said, particularly this last slide, you know, why or when do you need an integrator? This is what we typically foresee in the 6G space, right? Completely self-managing networks where AI is part of the network DNA, let's call it that way. And basically this is something which partially is currently started, but we are not yet there to have a solution which allows to pick and choose whatever kind of supplier components from the supplier diversity and make it a customized network environment.
But let's talk about the timescale. When we talked about 5G some years ago, everybody thought, wow, there are so much advantages of 5G. It will, you know, accelerate very fastly. But what we saw is that it took some time. Maybe because of COVID, I don't know. But why is it the case that it took so long? And what do you expect? When will 6G be really usable?
Should I? Okay, so in principle, I think there are many different reasons why 5G is having a slow start. And I think we are entering a very similar situation with 6G. We have to be very careful. Don't overhype a technology which is not yet available. We have to understand that we have seen all these movies about drones and complete automation of factories and so on, without having a working ecosystem in the 5G space. When you look on the technical side, we know that we started with release 14, release 15-ish kind of pre-5G infrastructures, and the standards which we now see, release 16 and particularly release 17, are only those standards which could fulfill the requirements of these industries. 5G has been designed for the industries, but the starting technologies have been made for public networks to provide more capacity. And this was the reason, and it was not COVID, honestly, it was the ecosystem was not there.
So the marketing departments were much too fast.
This was a horror show, I think, or a freak show. And now, however, we are in a situation where we see these smaller providers which allow for these aggregated, everyone is talking about disaggregation of networks, but what we see is the modularization of networks. You can pick, when you want different base stations, even disaggregated Open RAN base stations, you can have a core, you have a management system and all this stuff. However, as I mentioned, all this has to be integrated into an end-to-end architecture. And I think this is what many people underestimated. Yeah? So the network operators were not ready to provide these customizations. The IT departments of the enterprises were not ready for this new technology. And there's one point, it is cost, right? Yeah. So when you know that you have to go for 200K to have a starting package, this is not the way enterprises think. This is why I'm saying we need organic networks. You start with a 50, 100K small thing, and then you can grow it when you are convinced. I think the time is now. Now we see these components, but the automation and the integration is
They said that 2 years ago too.
Yeah, I would say open RAN, open 5G core systems are really a major step in this integration business. It allows us to investigate the technology into depth in a way that was not available before. And this makes integration and, let's say, understanding of the technologies much easier. So I encourage that more open functionality should be available to allow a market, and it's also for the benefit of the user, I would say, because with good, if you can read the source, you can understand why it's working or why it's not working.
When you're talking about Open RAN, we had the exhibition day yesterday. Were there visitors coming to your booth asking especially for Open RAN solutions? Is there an interesting in the community there?
I would say no. We haven't had any discussion with somebody asking directly of Open RAN functionality. We have these discussions with mobile network operators. So they are asking for Open RAN functionalities, yes, and we're doing integration there as well. But on the enterprise side, they are not so much, as I said before. They are also not interested into standards. If you want to say so, you can melt down the 5G core to one system and make it much smaller and make it oriented to the business. I think this is the way for the future of, let's say, the mass market of 5G infrastructures. There are many nightmares on this way because the mass market in private 5G networks would mean that every household may have a private 5G network, and then I would say this can be also a little bit difficult. Yeah.
But let's talk a bit about you said business. Let's be more specific. You had the automation vendors in your presentation as well. Here are a lot of automation vendors at Hannover Fair. Would it be a good marketing aspect that the automation vendors put in their measurement flow devices and the temperature devices and so on, that they put on all of the sensors assign 5G inside? That would that be a good marketing push for the whole community?
Okay, I would separate a little bit the notion of automation. When we talk about network automation, it's slightly different in the sense to the automation.
I mean the automation, the industrial automation vendors.
I think, you know, it might help a little bit if these tags, 5G ready, 5G inside, you know, we know this from big US companies, things inside. But I think in the very end, it is the price tag and that the functionality is really working, plug and play. So it doesn't help that the device just has this 5G ability. In the very end, it has to be very easily integrated into an environment. And I think we are still away from this kind of, you know, what the industry needs, in my opinion, are blueprints. And component catalogs, yeah? So again, I can just point to the Campus OS.
Yeah.
I can just point to the Campus OS project booth where we are really in a big BMW car flagship project are elaborating this market. And indeed, what is needed is a kind of IKEA shelf where you have components and you know that these components
Work
also
together
in combinations work together. So what we need is really blueprints which show this works for this market segment, this works for this small automation plant, this works for this bigger automation plant. And you know, currently you ask about Open RAN, I think in 2-3 years this will be a mass market thing. Currently we see that the limitations of the different Open RAN products are far away from the plug and play. It's a very ambitious plan for Open RAN, and network operators can sing a song about it, but we also can sing some songs about it when we integrate different bits and pieces. We use open source community stuff in order to make things work. So, but it's, I think, a package. It's not just a label on a device. It is this kind of also education of the industries. What are the best practices? You know, so I think when I talked to BMDV yesterday, and they said, okay, we need now the success stories to be told to the industry. So what are the findings of the different projects at this point in time? And I believe 5G is here as a great multiplier for the ecosystem. VDMR is a great place for this. And this is where the ecosystem players come together. And it's slowly, but I believe, I'm strongly convinced, the market is starting. And it is a global market, which is a good thing. When you see what is happening in 5G America's white papers, what you see what is happening in Japan, it's coming. Yeah? So.
But you have to convince the end users, and that's, I think, the problem. Why should I pay more when I'm buying a device, when I equip my facilities to be future-proof with 5G? I must know the advantages, and I must know the availability, so I must know which device to buy. I think that's an important part of the equation.
Again, it's exactly the price tag. 5G technology not necessarily must be more expensive. I think we need to see more competition, obviously. We have to see more products available, because when you provide things in quantity, then the price tag goes low, right? So, and people have to understand, with selling for 200K per year, a campus network for a plant doesn't work. Very simple, yeah?
Okay.
So,
if you need to have mobility and if you need to have robots, you need to have 5G infrastructures. That's for sure. And that's why I think sensor technology, at least in this, must have 5G capabilities, at least if it has been used in, let's say, changing or nomadic infrastructures, like constructions, like Agra, like the drone networks. Those really benefit from 5G technology, and I would believe that all sensors are 5G ready. That is my hope. So I don't, if this is the case, I don't need to have a label, but
maybe we have a time in between to convince the end users. So thank you very much. I have a look around. If there are still no questions, or I ask the other way around, do you have any questions for these two? I have a look at the audience desk outside there at the live stream. No, there are no questions. So, thank you very much, Professor Dr. Thomas Magedanz and Andreas Möller. Thank you very much for being with us, for sharing your insights, and a very successful exhibition today and the rest of the week.
Okay, thanks so much. And I just want to make a short advertisement. In the afternoon, there will be 2 panels on the ecosystem. So then you can at least see me and my colleague, Professor Stanzak, moderating the ecosystem players.
So, come back to watch this panel as well.